Hello and welcome back to the On Mission podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Jones, joined by my two good friends, my usual co-host, Pastor Rick Nicely, and for the first time since May, Jose Vazquez is rejoining us. The last time we had him on here, we were talking about our path to autonomy, which we have now been, I think, autonomous for about 2 months. And
going on 3.
Yeah.
Three. That's awesome.
Pretty exciting what God has done in Caroline County. And just in the church in general, brought us a new associate pastor. That's really exciting. A lot of great things are happening. Apologize, that has been a long time since we had a podcast. I've been trying to figure out my schedule and new job. We've all been adjusting to being our own church and all the responsibilities that come along with that. So we will strive to do better. We want to have Pastor Jim and Elaine sometime soon, so y'all can get to know them just a little bit better. I know many of you know them well, but it's always good to hear their story and how they came to know Christ. I'm looking on the camera right now, Jose. It looks like you're inching towards Rick. We often talk about who's your favorite elder, and you're making clear by the way you're sitting.
All I'm trying to do is line up on the light, whether you get close to me or not.
Yeah. Today we are discussing our first ever annual partners meeting, and more specifically, the budget. Before we get down to business, we want to do, as always, the question of the day. It is November 10th. Happy birthday, Maureen.
Happy birthday, Maureen.
245, right?
245 years old.
Yeah.
Semper Fi.
But already, as we get into the holiday season, we have commercials and stores that are already celebrating Christmas. So I want to know is in your family, and there's different ways that you celebrate. It could be decorating. It could be music is played, movies watched. I want to know for you, when does Christmas celebrations start in your house? So since you are the first time back in a while and you're our guest host today, when does your family start decorating for Christmas?
Thanksgiving, but we have to be flexible. Is it
the day of Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving?
I'm trying to establish more towards the day of Thanksgiving. We've done it a couple of years now, but we're all over the place.
All right. Yeah. Rick, how about you?
Typically, it's the day after Thanksgiving. I will tell you this. I love Christmas, but I'm a little bit of a bah humbug kind of guy when it comes to, like, decorations.
Really?
I don't know why.
Really?
I'd rather just go somewhere and, like, have a cabin set up and have Christmas and come back. But
my guess is that Michelle does.
She is like
going with you on that one.
Oh, yeah. One year, I think we had like 7 Christmas trees in the house. One on the porch. The girls had their little ones. It was everywhere. But she's already threatened to pull it out, and I have my responsibility to carry everything up and take the empty boxes down.
Right.
But it's usually the day after Thanksgiving. Okay. Yeah, typically.
So there's a big game every year on Thanksgiving, and this year it's even bigger because our Washington football team is playing our Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And for us, it's always as soon as the game is over. So the girls are chomping at the bit. Is the game over? Yeah. It looks like it's over, Dad. They're losing. Can we just start decorating? Right. And sometimes I'll cheat a little bit at halftime. I'll start to bring boxes upstairs. And then as soon as that game is over, though, the house it becomes Christmas.
This year may be over with before it starts.
We may be getting things going in the first quarter this year. So that's how we do it in my house. All right. Before we get to the budget, I do want to start with talking about the biblical basis of why we even bring the budget before the church body, why we talk about finances, why it's important that we do that. And so I just want to ask both of you, where in the Bible do we find the basis for, it may be discussions of the word stewardship is often used, about how we're supposed to handle money in the church. And why does that matter if our partners get a chance to look at the budget and talk about how we're going to spend what God has blessed us with? I'll start with you, Rick.
Yeah, so you're not going to find in the text anywhere this, thus saith the Lord, about the budget of the church, right? So you have to look at the principles of what you see throughout Scripture. It's really important. One, we've talked about this over and over again in our partnership series. I've preached on it several times since the birth of our church. And this idea that there's structure to everything that God creates, right? First, you see it all the way in the beginning in Genesis 1 and 2, where God creates Adam and Eve. He creates all of creation. And he says, be fruitful, multiply, cultivate. So there's structure. Adam and Eve were given dominion over the earth to subdue it, to create it, really to multiply. is a lot of people would say human flourishing. So then you see all through Genesis this same picture of fruitful and multiply. And of course, most of us think about kids and families and that type of thing, but it's really the whole earth. And then we fast forward to the New Testament, you see Jesus where he talks about go and make disciples, right? And he talks about in Matthew 16 and 18 about the keys of the kingdom. So as elders, we're given dominion, if you will, to lead the church as pastors and overseers. So that's the mandate structure-wise. And then we have deacons as servants, and then we have the whole church is the body, the people. So when you see that as a family, and I think about it on a personal level, we have a family. So what is our goal as a family? And so we go back to our vision as a church. What is our why? Why do we exist? We exist to glorify God by advancing his kingdom through obedience to the Great Commission. So what that happens is that kind of dictates our why, overarching vision. Then what that does is it translates into our whole ministry plan, which ultimately costs money, right? So it goes from big vision, it goes to ministry plan, then it has to practically flush out through a budget. That's true both in a family and in a church. So that's kind of what we see. And because we see as church partners, what we call owners, really, not fans, but actually partners with us, they have a play or they have a part of ownership in this to see it, for us to be transparent about it, and for them to really own it themselves, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Jose, how about you? Are there places in the Bible you look to when we talk about finances?
Yeah, and for me, it's been a learning experience, even from just creating this church, learning what the elder was and what an elder is, what a deacon is, and all that kind of stuff has really transformed my way of thinking. So as we went to the stewardship committee, we even studied, what does the word mean? It means the manager of a household. And the one thing that came out of the process is that, and this is something I really want the church to understand, just because we're called the stewardship committee doesn't mean that we're in charge of stewardship for the entire church. We're just a subset of it, in that we are held responsible to be stewards of our households, our ministries. So we're just talking about a subset of that too. And then principles that came out was that the principles of the individual stewardship applied to the stewardship committee, to the church. So things like tithing applies to the church. So that's things that we kind of vet into what the committee was going to do. Two things: God owns everything. That comes from Job 4:41-11. God delegates responsibility to Christ, to the church, and to the individual, and the word to work as co-workers. That's from 1 Corinthians 3:9. So again, the committee's duties, and as it belongs to this, as we're going to talk about this budget, it's really to be a subset of the church that is called to be a good steward of our resources, and that we have a responsibility to do that for the in assisting the members and partners of the church to do likewise. So we need to exemplify it just the same way that you and whoever's sitting in our chair in our services has to.
It's a role that you're playing.
It's a role.
Yeah, and people often get all caught up in the budget, and I always go back to Christ was clear about the Old Testament. The principles of the Old Testament don't go away. The law was replaced by the new covenant.
It was fulfilled,
But we see in the Old Testament, and I always go back to kind of when Christ was building the church. I look back in Numbers 18, where it creates a priesthood whose job is to be responsible for the church, and it's the idea that we have full-time ministers that are carrying out the business of the church, while those of us that are lay persons and lay elders, we go back to our jobs. And it makes clear that through the tithe, we support those ministries, whether it's paying for pastor salaries or those that work at the church. And it's just very clear about that. And so I always point back to that when people get caught up in it, that Christ created this architecture, this idea of this church, and that through our tithe would support that ministry and support those that serve us and carry out that mission 24/7, really, in the church. And so I go back to that one. I know is there a passage though you would point us to that you have, or some passages?
Well, it talks about the laborers, giving him honor and what he deserves in the New Testament. I think in 1 Corinthians 4, it talks about how we're to give an account. In other words, we're to give an account for what we're doing. And then Matthew 25, it really talks about this big picture of stewardship. And stewardship is, as he said, it's not just one person's responsibility, it's the whole church's responsibility. But I think as elders, we're going to be the ones giving account. It's like parents giving account for their family, right? And the father specifically. But I think what you see clearly in that is you're not to hide stuff, right? You're not to put it in the ground. You're to really be fruitful in it. You're to make it flourish. And so when we talk about the budget, it's a framework. It's not the law, but it's a framework. But within that framework, we're to see God's kingdom be advanced. This is all about making disciples that plant churches. So understanding that that's why we're doing what we're doing. So I think that big picture and understanding that really helps.
And that passage you referenced, the parable of the talents, that's a really good one about being, as Jose talked about, a good steward.
Yes.
And then there is a penalty if you were not a good steward. And
Absolutely.
he makes that clear in this parable.
Yeah.
All right, Jose, what has the stewardship committee been doing over the past weeks and really months to prepare us to get to where we can present a budget to our partners?
To be honest, it started with the mission and vision of the church and the elders coming together and trying to creating a culture and a personality that is unique to River Rock. But then when you go out to the implementation part, really started months ago with trying to figure out what the administration and management was going to be. And I wrote some notes because I think this is important to pass. You cannot create a budget if you do not know how is it going to be administered and managed. So that was the thing. So we had a lot of decisions to make. How we're going to manage to pay, how we're going to manage the execution, who's going to do it. And the Lord opened some amazing opportunities that they have helped us along the way. Especially SBCB has a what they call the innovative faith resources, which basically they provide financial services to us. So that helped us. Yeah, we were not alone anymore. We had somebody that had gone through the process before. So putting all those services in places, we're still working through some of those things that we need to still put in place. But having that kind of helped us figure out the big rocks, right? So once we had the big rocks, the other thing that we did is look at history. Before we were on our own and after, and then look at the character of the elders and now deacons and what people were investing on. So try to come up with a structure for that too. There was a lot of history there. It's a lot of history that has changed. You know, we're not the same people that we were back in 18 or 19 and 20. Every year has brought a different view of the things that God has called us to do. And then we have, you know, we don't have a building, we don't have a facility. So all that. So once those pieces were in places, the admin was in place. How are we going to manage it? We set up some guidelines. The budget was actually the easy part because by then you have selected the leadership. Most of them had a history. So we just, to be honest, that was the easiest part.
All the team leaders
Once you figure that out, it was easy. Now we still have some leaders that they're still trying to figure things out. And that's where I'm going to ask folks to be flexible about next year because we don't know. I mean, there are things politically, there's things about facilities that we still don't know what's going to happen because of, you know, this COVID thing, but we have a plan, an execution plan. So that was sent out about, to be honest, a month ago. Within 2-3 weeks, we got the budget back. So, and what you're going to see on the Sunday is going to be a sheet that has the area of ministry, basically personnel, functions, and ministry, and each one has a person by it. So we even have now responsible individuals that when you guys come up with answers, it's not just going to be Jose answering. You're going to have a week to review that budget and be able to ask ministerial questions to the people who are actually in that ministry.
We've talked about that, I think, a little bit, and I don't know how much, but we do have, each of the elders has an area of responsibility. You know, for instance, Jose has stewardship. I have the worship service, so that includes music, that includes connections. This podcast, it doesn't really cost us anything, but doing the music, streaming our services, those things cost money. And so I work with Vicki and Scott to figure out what are the things that we know we're going to have to expend money on. And again, like you said, there's flexibility in there. We can't foresee all the cost. There's some uncertainty in the building. We know what our rent is, but we don't know what costs we may have to put. And so we've done our best to kind of, again, COVID, like you said, has made it difficult. You don't have a full year at Ladysmith Community Center to know what all those expenses look like. And so I know you're going to talk about later, we've also had to make sure that we have an emergency fund, if you will, right in there, so that if something does come up, between us and our partners, CCPS, how are we going to make sure that we can continue to keep the lights on literally in that building? I do want to read one thing from our bylaws. We've tried to, again, we've talked a little bit about how we are slowly building the architecture, and we're trying to get to where we can follow the bylaws. And here's what the bylaws say about this meeting we're having on Sunday. It says, there shall be an annual church partners meeting at which election of new elders or lead elder, which we don't have, that will not be something we'll vote on, and the budget, because we don't have new elders right now to vote on, and the budget will be considered for approval by the church partnership. This meeting will be held no more than 3 nor less than 1 month prior to the start of the fiscal year. So Jose was good about making sure that we had this by November, since we go into fiscal year January. Is that correct, Jose?
It's the calendar year.
Calendar year, January, December. The elders shall see that the stated meetings of the church are regularly held and that required reports are submitted to the church by the responsible church partners, which you already talked about, submitting reports to us, making sure we understand how the money is being spent. So what should our partners expect? So this Sunday is the budget brief. What should they expect at the budget brief? You kind of talked about it a little bit, but anything else you want to say on that?
Basically, I hope to bring to the partners the basic principles that are going to guide not just the budget, but the execution of the budget. One thing that I have gotten from the elders is the level of transparency they really want to have with the partners. They want them to know that we hear them and that we're executing as a community. So they're going to get some kind of overview of the process, how it's going to be executed, and then the presentation of the budget. There'll be the personnel piece, there'll be the operational piece, and then the ministry piece. And this is it. And then we will end with a motion to accept the budget for consideration at the next time we meet, which will be the following Sunday. And what we want folks to do is to take what was shared at the meeting and pray about it for the week. And if they have questions, to go to those individual folks that are leading that ministry and ask questions out of them. And then by the time we come back, we should all kind of be in the same sheet of music. The one thing, and this is kind of important, and I just want to be transparent about this, is that we're not really looking for changes, because the leaders have already vetted this. What we're looking now is for your inputs and buy-in into the budget, which is kind of a different concept. I know that one of the things that we were trying to do is be different. There is churches out there. One thing I learned, that churches don't have policies about anything. When it comes to financial stuff, we want to make sure that everybody's at the same level of understanding, and they understand that every line is used in accordance to their mission, vision, and guidelines. And
there may be suggestions they have, or things, Rick and I were in a business meeting at a previous church a few years back, and we had a meeting about a project the church was taking on. And as you had said, a lot of time was spent, but someone raised their hand and said, well, what about this? And that had not been remembered. And so that was important. Well, we're not perfect.
Right.
Correct. And so we had, okay, that's a good point. We need to figure out how we put that into the budget. And another thing is we talked about a lot is what are the priorities?
Yeah.
We can't do everything we want to do right now. We've made very clear that there are key staff that at some point we want River Rock Church to bring on. But we've got to prioritize based on the budget we have. And so we do want to hear, I know you said we want to hear from our partners if they have suggestions or things maybe we forgot about, or just things they think are important to us in our ministry in Caroline County. So what are some of the big ticket items or highlights of the budget? You've already mentioned a few, the personnel and those.
And I tell you, that should not be a surprise to anybody. It doesn't matter what business, government or non-government, the personnel is always the biggest one, right? But then after that, you have the operational funding parts of it, the lights, the applications, all this stuff that is happening that support the facility itself. And then you got the ministry pieces of it. And I think they'll find a budget that is quite balanced, that is preparing us for a future. We don't know what the future is going to look like, but I think it creates a good foundation where our hope is that the ministry will grow out of that. So if you go as you look into this budget, look at this as the concrete foundation to build on. You cannot just show up to a place and start building on just sand, right? So this budget, in my opinion, is that laying of the bricks of all the foundations that now ministry can build in. And even if we bring more staff, facilities, that will become now secondary to the ministerial parts of it. So I think we've done that. I think the budget is going to present a solid foundation that we can build on. So,
speaking of things that we are kind of building on, today was a big day, right? We moved furniture and things that were in your office, the previous church plant office, into the building. You excited about?
It's very exciting.
There.
It's nice to start kind of feeling like it's becoming a
what
home.
What have we done? So I mean, this is one way that we had to be good stewards. What have we been doing?
So the places to the right and left of the stage, one side has kind of become mostly all storage, and then there's going to be a small group that's been going on there, a student small group. And on the right side, there's a kind of an entry place and then two places. One, the very back area, the largest space, is going to become an office, and that'll be an office myself, Pastor Jim, and Ashley, and Casey when she needs it. And then anybody who, if we're doing elder meetings or different other meetings, they're becoming a great meeting space, counseling space. And then there'll be a storage and restroom to the side, and then a small group space. And we've painted it. There's a few touch up and trims we need to do, but in the office it's good. We got most of the furniture. We're going to do some more purchasing of some things that need to go in there, put some rugs down. So it's starting to become home. I've got to unload a ton of books. Got to build some shelves in there. So a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, so to speak, going into that. But man, our people just jumped in there, and it's been great. So, we love that we're in the community center. We love that we're building a relationship with both Parks and Rec and the public schools, and it's been a beautiful relationship, and we hope that partnership will continue. So we're excited.
If you heard the name Casey and you're not sure, we're going to introduce this Sunday. Just as going to be kind of build out the church. We're going to introduce you. Most of you know Ashley, who has for the long time, Jose, you were the admin for the church, and now we have a paid
Ashley,
position.
thank you.
So we're going to introduce Ashley to you that don't know her, and then Casey, who now is heading up our kids ministry. That'll be coming on Sunday. And then, like I mentioned, in the coming weeks on the next podcast, we're going to talk to Jim and Elaine. But that is all the time.
Sorry about that. I kind of dropped her name without thinking.
No, it's fine. Casey English. If you didn't know, we have hired her as our kids ministry coordinator. I think that's right. And Ashley's been doing this. When did you and Ashley turn over? When did she take over from you?
It's been a month.
About a month.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
She's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Like we have some neat ideas, and she actually makes them work.
Yes.
And so she's been
talented
great.
lady.
And correct us when we
right. But that is all the time we have on the On Mission podcast. Like I said, we will have an episode coming out with Jim and Elaine very soon. I want to thank my co-producer, Lindsay Jones, as she helps me put this in a usable format on the internets, as one of our former presidents said. But we are so excited about everything that God is doing down in Caroline County, River Rock Church, Caroline. And we look forward to seeing all of you on Sunday.
Adios.